Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. I'm going to be doing a live stream today, doing some more news. Tons of articles to go through today, so I'm hoping to maybe wrap up in about an hour and a half or so, but I think it'll take about that long because there's just a lot of stuff going on. So we got one viewer in. Hello. Let me just check if I can see the chats. If you can, just let me know if the audio is okay. You can hear me okay? I'm going to assume it is unless somebody tells me otherwise. So yeah, just in the interest of time, because I do have to get going pretty soon to take care of some stuff after this, I'm going to actually just jump right into it. I know this is a bit early. Lately, I've been doing these at night, and I think that's usually a little bit easier for the US-based audience. I realize for people out on the west coast of the US, this is probably like way too early. You're probably all asleep or just waking up. But hopefully, maybe some of the European viewers might like this. I might do it up, change it up a little bit every once in a while. Do a couple earlier ones, do a couple later. We will see how people like it. So yeah, let me share my screen and we'll jump into the first one right away. Let's do it. All right, cool. So first article I just wanted to share with you is actually kind of an opinion piece that I saw on Patreon. And this is specifically about Nina Teicholz. I think I'm pronouncing her name right, but I'm not 100% sure. She's one of these kind of like, I don't know, meat-eating advocate kind of people. She's a little bit paleo, a little bit kind of like carnivore, a little bit fat, friendly, saturated fat is good for you, cholesterol denier kind of people. I mean, I'm kind of generalizing a little bit here, but in general, that's kind of what she's about. And she does a lot of stuff. She's got kind of like a very popular TED Talk, if anybody has seen that. Mike the Vegan, shout out to Mike the Vegan. I'm sure everybody watching probably knows his channel, but if you don't, check out and subscribe to his channel. He's awesome. And I love his approach. He's got very kind of like science-based, approach, and he does a lot of stuff like looking into studies, very deep level. I find him to be incredibly motivating, and I love his kind of style and his humor as well. He's got a little bit of a dry sense of humor, and I like that. And anyway, he's done a great debunking about Nina Teicholz. Specifically, some of the stuff she makes claim in her TED Talk about, fat being good for you and the Maasai being healthy and that kind of thing. And yeah, anyway, this article is actually just very interesting because they start talking about kind of her conflicts of interest, financial conflicts of interest. And I'm always going on about this, that, it doesn't necessarily negate what somebody is saying just because they have a conflict of interest, but it's just something that we should know about, and it should be there for making a little bit of extra scrutiny on everybody's part when you're looking at claims being made by people who have something to gain financially by you listening to what they have to say. So this just goes into, I guess, like several instances where she's collecting money from different kind of associations or companies, and then basically in studies that she is kind of like pushing or whatever, she fails to, basically make known the financial interest that she has. So you can see that in this first example in 2015, she was compensated $24,000 for what is listed as 10 hours of work per week as a secretary of the Nutrition Coalition. And later on, she has been promoted to executive director, and they don't know what kind of bump in pay that may have given her. But then, she'll still show disclosure as, no disclosed relevant financial relationships. And, they're basically just saying that, like, look, she is supposed to be kind of like disclosing this stuff just like other people should be, and that she calls out specifically people in the medical community and people in, journals and things like that where they have financial interest, and she's kind of like going on about this all the time. They have very good screenshots and exchanges between her and other people, and she's basically playing dumb, like when people call her on this. And you know, basically, like, this is a really funny one here. I don't know this guy, Yoni Friedhoff. He's an MD apparently. He says, "Sorry to be clear, you're asking a second time now why you, author of best-selling dietary guidelines nutrition book, whose current career and platform dependent on your opinions therein, should declare your book and more as conflicts of interest in articles about dietary guidelines and nutrition." And then she says, "Yes, thanks. That is my question." She's playing dumb, basically, like, just like, oh, I don't understand why people would think that's relevant. It's like she's got a lot of money riding, you know, on these medical and nutrition and health advice claims that she makes. And she basically just makes it seem like that's not going to be any kind of interest to anybody. So yeah, it's very, very interesting and very good examples here in the post. I definitely recommend anybody check this out in case you know, you need to like get any more information than Mike already did in his video debunking Nina Colts. So yeah, check this out. I think this is a really cool article. Okay, let me jump back here, make sure I don't miss anything in the chat, although I don't see anybody chatting yet. But if anybody has any trouble hearing me, just let me know. I can adjust the audio. Okay, next we've got some good news. I have actually a bunch of good news items today, and should be pretty fun. But this is one of them. IKEA in America and Europe apparently has launched the Veggie dog, and I believe that this is actually replacing the I think it replaces their existing animal dog. I'm not sure. Let's see. Oh, add more vegan offerings. So this might not be a replacement. I thought it was, though. Anyway, I'll have to like look through that again. But regardless, even if it's just an additional option on the menu, I think that's great. And here, you know, the Forbes article explains that the Veggie dog has approximately 7 times less CO2 emissions than its standard version. The carbon footprint of the hot dog is made from meat is 6.38 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram, while the Veggie one has only a little over 1. So it's, you know, just about almost 7 times less carbon emissions. Obviously, it uses less water and everything else too. But yeah, this is great stuff, and just wanted to share that. And if anybody goes to IKEA, and those like shopping things experiences can be like a real drain. I don't know about anybody else, but I actually really hate shopping there. I hate the maze layout and that you have to like walk through the whole thing unless you know all the little shortcuts. So I don't know, sometimes you do get hungry from being there, and the fact that they do have some veggie options and things to eat is actually pretty good. I've eaten there a couple times with my family just because we were stuck there and it was like getting really late. The kids were getting cranky, and yeah, it's just nice to be able to have some veggie options there. So check that out. Another bit of good news. I found this article that showed Simon Cowell from the X Factor. I'm not actually a huge fan of him, but anyway, this is really cool. He's donating 25,000 pounds to help, you know, basically shelter and relocate rescued dogs from South Korea. So I think that's really cool. Like, they're closing down some dog meat farms there, and getting the you know, the animals like help and stuff. They're saving 200 plus dogs with the amount of money that he's donated. So I thought that was pretty cool. Nice to share. Like I always do, I'll share all the links to these stories in the comments afterward. So if anybody wants to check these out or pass them along to anybody, feel free. This one is a huge bit of news, and again, you know, in the positive area. Dean Foods, which is actually, it says America's largest dairy company, but they're actually one of the largest food companies, I believe. They own tons and tons of like subsidiaries that most people would probably know, and I actually wasn't aware of it, but they own Silk as well, which is like the big soy milk company. But they also have, it says here, they made a minority investment in Good Karma Foods in 2017 and increased its investment last month. And then they're basically talking about how they want to really like build up that that company as a platform for themselves. And they make reference to how they did that with Silk. Yeah, they remember how small Silk was when this company brought it in-house many years ago. And then basically they're just saying that they're committed to doing this and that they see this as the future. And it's really cool that they also are saying that they are not going to be renewing their contracts for a bunch of, it says dozens of dairy suppliers after May 31st because of lack of consumer demand. So I thought this was fantastic news. You know, it says right here, according to the 2013 USDA report, dairy consumption has been on the decline for decades, with each generation consuming less milk than the one before. And yeah, you know, it says here another report showed fluid milk consumption has fallen a whopping 37% since 1970. So this is all great news for anybody who knows about the cruelty inherent in the dairy industry. And, you know, hopefully this is just a sign of more things to come. They're talking about how some of these other, you know, dairies here, they mentioned the Elmhurst Dairy in Queens closed its doors after 90 years in business, and they switched to making plant-based milks. This is the future. I don't think a lot of farmers kind of understand when, you know, vegan activists are there protesting against the cruelty of the animal industry, that they are not against the farmers. The farmers just need to realize that this is a trend that is happening, and they can either get on board with it and, you know, switch their business to doing something that is ethical and profitable, or they're going to go out of business at some point. Because as the world changes more and more, you know, thankfully, people are waking up and they are seeing that these businesses are inherently cruel and they don't want to support it. They're environmentally unsustainable, and without big government support and, you know, tax subsidies and things like that, they are not going to be sustainable at all, like financially either. So I think this is a great, you know, sign of things to come. And especially if large companies like this, they see the writing on the wall and they know what business they want to be in, others will hopefully follow as well. With that said, too, about government subsidies, I wanted to share this. Last Vegan News video, I talked a little bit about some lobbying efforts and some political efforts that people might be interested in to basically, you know, push for an end of government subsidies for the animal agriculture industry. This is another effort here. This campaign is basically asking for people to contribute to a lobbying effort to do just what I said, and the subsidies for animal agriculture. It's got a pretty good write-up here, and it talks a lot about kind of how much of the subsidies go to these industries and all the efforts that you know, politicians put in there, and all the lobbying groups that you know, that tend to get a lot of money to, you know, push for these things. And what they're saying is basically that they want a similar lobbying effort that can have a voice politically in the U.S. to end these you know, farm bill, you know, subsidies, and reallocate those dollars to things that are ethical and vegetable based, so that people can switch their business practices. Instead of producing milk, switch to plant milk. Instead of, you know, grazing cattle, plant you know, grains that can grow on the same fields. So there's very good information out there already that a lot of land that is considered, you know, only just barely suitable for grazing animals, with a little bit of adjustment to farming practices, you can easily grow grains on there, you know, oats, wheat, all sorts of other things, and be profitable. So I think this is like a really good effort. If anybody has the wherewithal, I would definitely recommend that they check this out or something similar, and hopefully we'll see more of these in the future as well. This is a bit of bad news in the sense that the underlying problem here is really highlighting kind of the environmental impact that we're seeing throughout the world. It's basically talking about a zoo that they're not able to get these particular type of penguins. I forget even what they were, Humboldt penguins. They're native to Chile and Peru. And these British zoos like getting them because they apparently cope well with the climate, as it says here. So they are trying to get these birds, and there's a shortage of them. They are an endangered species. So, it says, sorry, they're classified as vulnerable species. which I think is just like one level below the endangered, and you can't take them from the wild. And other zoos also have a shortage, so they can't buy them from other zoos. And what this zoo has resorted to doing is they've set up these plastic penguins in their penguin, like, whatever display. And I think this is almost kind of like comical in a way, because like people go to a zoo to see animals, not to see plastic dolls. But in a way, I mean, it's kind of good that at least they don't have animals like suffering and trapped in these like stupid enclosures. I think a lot of times people think that zoos are not really harmful to animals, but if you really think about the kind of range that most of these wild animals would have in the wild versus what they get in zoos, it would be like the equivalent of spending the rest of your life like, trapped inside of a house, let's say, or, maybe even just a small room for some of the animals. Like you look at like wolves and bears and stuff, they cover immense ground, and then they're stuck in these little, dens or whatever. I don't know about the penguins, but I would imagine that they do a lot of swimming. So it's kind of like ridiculous. And the other reason why they talk about why there's a shortage is because there is some kind of like avian type of, I don't know if it's a flu or some other type of disease or whatever that is affecting them and further reducing their numbers. So it's actually quite a sad story in a way, but I think just in a way it's almost like this like morbidly, kind of funny thing that like people are resorting to like putting plastic birds in a, zoo. And it's just like, it's insane that like that this is what the world is coming to. I mean, if we're not careful with what is happening on the earth, the rate of species extinction means that for a lot of these animals, like we may end up only being able to see them in like, like the few stuffed remains of like a museum piece type thing display, at some point. And people really need to wake up. So Ryan just joined. Hey, Ryan, just joined the stream. You're doing awesome things. Thank you very much. I agree with you. It is the future that is a relief amidst all the unnecessary suffering. Yeah, I think you were talking about the dairy. I just noticed your comment. Yeah, we definitely need to change. Like you can't keep doing things the way that this is happening. So, all right. Next one up is again kind of this like happy but somewhat sad story for me. They found this new species of fish. They named it Aphrodite because it's just so beautiful and all this kind of stuff. And you can see a picture of it here. It really is a striking fish. And they basically talk about how the researchers were, making this discovery, and they basically ignored all these other kind of like unique and rare fish and animals that they saw around it because it was just so enchanting. And Dad said it made us ignore everything around it. So I think that's just kind of funny that like, people see a pretty colored fish and it's like, wow, like that's so cool. And then everything else around it is kind of like ignored. But then the thing that really got me is that here they said the team were so shocked by the fish that they failed to notice a 6-gill shark circling above them. So I think that's probably some kind of other rare species. But the part that made me sad was that they actually took some of these fish. So they said that they collected several specimens of the species. So, I just think like people are just so kind of crazy that like these are like scientists who are like understanding that they're discovering a new species. They have no idea how rare it is or any kind of thing, but yet they're taking specimens out of the natural environment because they want to like, I don't know, basically like lay claim to it and like, oh, like I got to name a new species and whatever. It's just this incredibly crazy kind of like entitlement that people have to think that like we can just go wherever we want on this earth and just like take animals and do whatever we want with them. I mean, it's just insane. And even here they say that these remote formations, it's like off the coast of Brazil somewhere, St. Paul's Rock. It says these outcroppings of solidified lava pushed up into the ocean at the tectonic boundary of the mid-Atlantic ridge are home to many organisms that appear to live nowhere else on Earth. So it's like you find this like incredibly unique, like, beautiful thing, beautiful fish, and then it's like you take some specimens. It's like, I don't know, people are just so, it's like arrogant and crazy. Like I don't understand like how people don't see the irony of it. Like most of these are like these could be like, onion articles, like in a way, like people just don't see like how crazy these things are. But anyway, despite that, it is a beautiful fish. So I figure that's kind of like maybe good in the sense that people will see it and think like, yeah, we need to do more to, increase like conservation efforts and things like that. This next one is a very interesting situation. So I don't know if anybody, or hopefully everybody's aware, like watching this, but if you're not, there's a group called Direct Action Everywhere, DXE. They are a animal rights organization, and they have done many different kinds of like protests and activism events. They've done, as their name implies, some direct action kind of activism as well, where they've gone into factory farms, sometimes I guess kind of technically illegally. They've obtained footage which under the ag-gag laws are considered illegal, and they've been threatened with jail time. They've been arrested. They've been sued. I think there are some active lawsuits against certain members of the organization as well, because they are exposing the ugly truth about the animal agriculture industry. And what they did most recently, this was just this past week, a couple days ago, they basically kind of went and I guess technically trespassed on a farm to basically show the conditions of the animals, because they already had undercover footage that they obtained, like proving that animals there were suffering and that they were malnourished. They didn't have food and water. They were dead animals left in the sheds. The birds were kind of like decomposing already. There was a bunch that were sickly or had broken legs or other kind of injuries. And the kind of leader of the organization, I don't know if I'll pronounce his name right, but I think his name is Wayne Sung, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but anyway, he's I guess a lawyer and has quite an extensive legal background, and they basically they did a live stream where they went on to this farm, and their intention was that they were going to provide medical assistance to the sick and diseased animals, and they. Their claim was that it's basically not trespassing, because under California law, where the farm is located, you actually have the right to even go onto private property if there is animal abuse that you were trying to stop. Hey, Swag Vegan, I see you're on. I'll just quick hello. Gotta go cat the kids. Yep. Have fun, man. Yeah. Hopefully you do get back on. And thanks. I am well, and hope you're well too. Shout out to Swag Vegan. If anybody is not signed up yet, go sign up to his channel. He's got great stuff, and he's doing very regular content as of the past couple weeks as well. So great to have him on the YouTubes. So check out his stuff. So they went on to this farm and they did a live stream, and they were asking the people who were viewing the live stream and encouraging them to call the police and tell the police that they should be supporting the animal rescuers and not the animal abusers. And a bunch of them got arrested. So I think it's something like 50 some odd people got arrested, and they got charged with like trespass and a few other things. And they're obviously going to fight it like legally. I applaud their efforts. I think especially if there is such a law in California. I mean, I'm not a legal expert by any means, so like I just kind of have to take that at face value. But hopefully that is the case, that they do make a good case. There is definitely proof. I mean, they have the video proof right there of the diseased and dying birds. And the other thing that's important to note, and this article does a great job of highlighting it, is that this poultry producer that they went and exposed is the one, I think it's maybe the largest organic free range like chicken producer like in the country. I don't remember if it's the largest or just one of the largest, but I don't remember the anyway, check out the article. But the point is that they're a huge bird producer, chicken producer, and they are suppliers to Whole Foods and of course to Amazon, which is the parent company of Whole Foods now. And this article also talks about some of the interesting things that the marketing shows for these birds. They show that they are free range and sustainable. Hey, hi, Hesse. Thanks for joining, man. So these these guys are basically marketing themselves as being like, hey, you know, like these birds are like in the sunshine and scratching around on the ground and all this kind of stuff to appease people's, you know, conscience. But then when you go and look at the sheds, like none of these chickens are outdoors. They're all indoors. They're all in these huge sheds, and they're just literally kind of going and, you know, climbing over the bodies of their, you know, dead and sick, like, you know, fellow chickens. So it's pretty crazy. And they also do a good job of explaining how some of the same producers, so I think this goes up to Purdue, apparently, I think, if I remember right. Yeah, Purdue Foods owns Petaluma Poultry, and basically they're pointing out that it's the same company selling these chickens, which are like the marketed as the organic and you know, free range and all this kind of stuff. So it says here free range, sustainably farmed, and they're also the same ones that are producing the, you know, the admittedly mass factory farmed, you know, shed style chicken, except that it just costs 2 or 3 times as much. So it's literally a case of people paying extra money to appease their, you know, conscience and their guilty conscience to think that they're getting a better, you know, more humane product, when in reality this is what the, you know, the chicken sheds look like. This is free range, this is organic. And there's, you know, dead and dying birds all over the place and manure and everything that they're just living in. So check this out. And definitely, you know, I am no fan of Amazon. I used to be a huge fan of Whole Foods. I'm no longer a fan of Whole Foods. But if anybody has any kind of, like, you know, dealings with them, or if you buy from them, like, please, please, please make your voice be heard, and tell them that you support DXE, and, you know, try to share this, you know, as much as you can. I've shared out the DXE post on my Twitter account as well. So if anybody, you know, is on Twitter, if you haven't added me, feel free to, you know, follow me and share that post as well. And yeah, like, let's pressure these guys financially, because that's the only thing that matters to them is money. So check out this article. I think it's very well written and shows a good, you know, side to the activists. Okay, next I kind of wanted to do another bit of good news. So this is, I don't know if Swag's still on, but you'll like this if you're watching it in the replay. Music fans, probably my age or older, or if you have like parents who are into like kind of like the 60s, 70s hard rock of the day, you probably know Deep Purple. And for a while, Deep Purple had some various lineup changes, and Glenn Hughes was a vocalist slash bass player in the group for a while. And I think he's most famous for that, but he's done a bunch of other stuff as well and got quite a voice, very kind of like high voice and mean bass player as well. But anyway, just I think today I saw a post. It was somebody posted some pretty graphic footage about an unfortunate cow being killed in a halal slaughter. And there was a post by Glenn Hughes in reaction to it, and he was just saying like, wow, you know, like, this is so terrible or whatever. And he said something like, I wish people, you know, thought about karma or whatever. And I was like, wow, I wonder if he's vegan. And so I just did a quick search, and sure enough, he's vegan. This is just an article that I found where he's being interviewed, and he talks about how he's vegan. So I just, where was it there? Let me just do a search because I wanted to read the little thing where he wrote it. Yeah, so he says he did a yeah, here it is. He did a song inspired by The Cove. So if anybody is not familiar with, there was a movie called The Cove as well, and he wrote a song to kind of talk about that. Basically, it's a place in Japan where they do a slaughter of dolphins every year. It's quite sad and very graphic. You can find various activist groups that have done you know, video footage of it, and there's just like, you know, just I don't even know how many dolphins they kill every year, and just, you know, the sea turns red with their blood. It's awful. But basically, this guy wrote a song about it. So it says, as an ambassador for the Dolphin Project charity, Hughes describes between February and March each year, 50 dolphin hunters in the Japanese village of Taiji go deep into the ocean and net and bring in the dolphins into the killing cove and slaughter them for food and entertainment. He says, now that I'm a vegan, I want to educate people, as it's deeply saddening to see how these beautiful creatures are killed. I want to be of service to the human race and show people that this is wrong. I thought this was beautiful, and definitely if anybody's into kind of like hard rock, and you probably know Deep Purple. Like Glenn Hughes is a pretty crazy musician, so definitely check this out. I thought that was really cool. Another bit of kind of good news, but in the same sense, in a way, kind of almost like it could be an Onion article as well. There is a last-ditch attempt, it says, by biomedical science advocate groups to force airlines to carry experimental animals, including primates. Because as it turns out, through successful lobbying from various animal activist groups like PETA and others, many major airlines have actually decided and opted to deny animal research facilities carriage. Like basically, they will not let them ship live test animals on their airlines. And this is awesome. I didn't even know about this, but so apparently they say, they began advocating for this for 2 decades now, I guess in the 90s, and they were protesting against this, and they said, like, look, you can't ship like primates and non-human primates and all this kind of stuff. And these research groups basically want to force the U.S. government to force the airlines to like carry their stuff and not be allowed to quote unquote discriminate against these animal research groups. So I thought this was just awesome. And the main thing here is it says I guess like PETA is also mounting a counter argument to this and what have you. But the point that I wanted to make here was they gave some indication of numbers about the animals, and where was that? And they're talking about like mice and all this kind of stuff and other things. Hold on. Oh yeah, here. Approximately 23,000 non-human research primates were imported to the United States in 2014. And so that's just 1 year. And that's the last year for which figures are publicly available. So this is just, just an indication of kind of how many animals are ultimately basically, cruelly treated, tortured, and then killed, sometimes in the most horrific of fashions imaginable, in the name of research and, science. And if anybody hasn't seen it, I have done a video where I talk specifically about animal research and why it is completely illogical, it's immoral, and it's just ineffective. But in a nutshell, I mean, it can lead people down the wrong paths. It can give, false hope, or it can also give, false positives or false negatives, where you think that something isn't going to be effective, and then later on it would turn out that it would be. But because an animal test might show the opposite, people might give up on certain kind of developments and treatments. So it's just a very, very cruel and unnecessary, thing. And I think it's just this kind of like dream that people have that like you can get some kind of benefit to humans from testing on animals. And when you think that you can do that, it's kind of easier, I think, for people in their mind to let go of the moral and ethical considerations. So, I've talked to people about this before, and they say like, look, if I had to kill every monkey on earth to, get some kind of disease treatment for my kid to save their life or whatever, I would do it. And it's like, this is it's not the reality. Like, it probably wouldn't be helpful to you. That's number one. And then number two is that people just don't consider what that even means. Like, how would that affect the world at large? How would that affect, the ecosystem and everything else? We cannot make those kind of decisions. And it's just this crazy thing. So I applaud the airlines for standing firm against this. They said that they don't recognize this advocacy group's complaint, and they don't think there's any kind of legal requirement for them to take any kind of I guess like baggage or any kind of shipment on board that they don't want. So if they don't want to support this, they're not going to, and I applaud that. And hopefully that remains the case. Okay. This next article is again kind of like, I kept finding stuff this week that like is just mind-boggling to me, that like like this could easily be a joke article, but it's not. So apparently a big game hunter went after a bear with his buddy. They were out, hunting, and this guy shot the bear who was at the top of a cliff, and the bear then fell on him and like severely injured him to the point that I think he had like life-threatening injuries, and he ended up in the hospital. He was airlifted out. And it's like, far be it from me to laugh at anybody's misfortune, and I don't, but I'll tell you guys a story about kind of my own past, just so that you understand kind of why I think this one is especially crazy. Long ago, when I was very much not a vegan, and I actually wanted to start hunting. So my brother and I, at that time, like we were learning how to shoot, and we went and took a hunting course so we could get our hunting license. And in the hunting course, they teach you a whole bunch of stuff about safety. And like one of the things that I very vividly remember is that like you never ever take a shot where you cannot very clearly see behind the target. So whatever it is you're trying to shoot. And you don't shoot over hills, you don't shoot over anything where like the visibility is obstructed and you can't see clearly of what's behind it. The idea is that if you shoot over a hill, you don't know if you miss, or even if the bullet goes through the animal, like where it might end up afterward, because it can very clearly go over the hill, and then just based on the trajectory, it can go very far away and land and hit somebody else or something else, or have some kind of other unintended consequence. And so for me, I'm trying to picture the physics here involved of like this guy shooting basically up to hit an animal on a cliff. Like there's no way he can see what's beyond it. And if you're just like shooting like a bullet into the air, like it'll go really high up if you miss that animal, and then when it's coming back down, you could easily harm somebody. Now maybe this guy's out in the middle of nowhere and that's kind of what he was thinking, but again, it's just like basic like hunting safety principles that you're not supposed to be doing this kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just like this crazy thing. So in a way, like poetic justice, I guess, or something, but I don't know. Hopefully the guy learns, not to do this kind of stuff anymore. All right. Another bit of good news. California, where was the, yeah, here it is. California, go California, man. They signed into law a ban on animal testing for cosmetic purposes. So this just happened a couple days ago, I believe. Yeah, September 28th. It's about a week ago. And yeah, they banned testing for cosmetic purposes. So hopefully that means like, I don't even know, like countless, rabbits and beagles and all sorts of other of these very, beautiful little creatures and animals and mice and rats and everything else, they won't be allowed for testing cosmetics anymore. And I think, even when I was, again, not a vegan and I believed in animal testing because of all the lies that I had heard, even then I was opposed to animal testing for cosmetic purposes. I mean, I'm sorry, but like for somebody to have like some lipstick or some kind of whatever, blush or whatever people are putting on their faces, like, and for that to have an animal be tortured, that's just an insane proposition. I could never get behind that, even as a non-vegan. So I applaud them for this. I hope that many other states, and I hope all the other states follow suit, and I hope other countries do too. And I think a lot of countries in Europe have already done this as well. So, let's just get this happening all throughout the world. And if people make this connection, then hopefully they can make the ethical connection for the other types of testing. So that was good news there. This next one is just kind of another example of, like I talked about last week too, where you have kind of like a news item where they talk about the adverse health consequences of consuming animal products, and then right away you get all these experts who are trying to chime in and jump in and tell you that like, oh no, don't worry, but it's not as bad as you think, or they start making excuses right away. So they basically showed that it was a review of women eating high levels of processed meat. They had a 9% increased risk of cancer compared with those who ate little of it. The World Health Organization has previously already said that it is definitely a known carcinogen as far as like prostate and colorectal, and I think it was colorectal cancer actually, but there's some linkages to prostate cancer in men as well, and breast cancer in women. And then right away this basically, it's like experts recommend caution about the findings and say the actual risk for individual women is very small. And then they basically try to start, appeasing people's worries and telling them that, like, look, it's not really all that clear, and like, there's like there's problems with the studies because there's different groups and there's different countries and they use different categories for the consumption of high. In the UK, it's only 9 grams a day, which is the equivalent of just 2 or 3 rashers a week. So I think that's British for slices of bacon. If any of my British audience can correct me on that, I think that's what that means. And then, they're basically saying in other countries, the high group was more than that. And so I would actually probably want to see the real study if I was going to nitpick this article, like, for real. But I just thought more, just the reaction is like, so it's like, should we? Hey, Palin Ho. Welcome to the stream. So they're basically just saying, like, right away, like, should we cut out processed meat? And it's like, the answer to this should be a resounding yes. Like, it is a known carcinogen, and whether or not it is also a known carcinogen for breast cancer doesn't really matter, because it already is a known carcinogen for colorectal cancer. But right away they go and they say, well, this expert or whatever lead author from the wherever, public health in the US recommends cutting down on the meat rather than eliminating it. It's like, why would you recommend that if you know that it causes other types of cancer and probably causes breast cancer as well? And then they're saying, no, just don't eat more than 70 grams of it a day. And it's like, they're saying, like, in the UK group, 9 grams a day was the high group, and they're telling you don't eat more than 70. So it's like, it's just completely, like, they just take the whole thing of the study and they just tell you the opposite. So yeah, it's just really ridiculous. And then whoever this person is, Dr. Gunter Kuhnle, associate professor in nutrition and health at the University of Reading, who was not involved in the study, and I will add, probably didn't even read the study, said it was questionable whether the people should lower their red and processed red meat consumption at the back of this study. He said the actual risk posed by processed meats was very small for the individual and more relevant on a population-wide level. And it's just like, they talked about in the beginning of the article about how many extra deaths a year this will mean, like in the UK, for example. And this guy's just like, yeah, but for the individual, like, this is only really relevant on the population. It's like, this doesn't even make any sense. But yeah, God bless the BBC. Like, this is what we get in all mainstream news, and we're no better in the US media either. So just wanted to share that. I think that's pretty funny. All right, this next one, again, very kind of serious, like, sad news. This article was very interesting. They talk about how many of the national parks in the US will be, like, drastically different in a very short amount of time. They're saying that by 2100, people visiting these parks are going to be, looking at, like, basically just like a little bit of a semblance of what they were like formerly. Like, they're talking about how the glacial park, for example, like, you're not gonna be able to see the glacier. It's going to be all melted. They're talking about, like, how some of the forests in Yellowstone are being, like, decimated, and some of it is from the I forget what kind of beetle that is attacking them, and because of global warming, they have an extended active time throughout the year, so they're not getting killed off by the cold winters. So there's more time for them to, like, basically go and attack the various pine trees. And then they're talking about the wildfires and how they are taking out bigger and bigger sections of forest. Here they have this picture at Glacier Park where you can see people walking and kind of, like, trying to enjoy the water here, and meanwhile there's a huge forest fire raging in the background. And this is, like, a very shocking kind of story where they're talking about how these very serious impacts are being observed in these parks, and they're looking at data going back all the way to 1895. So they're looking from 1895 to 2010, and they're looking at dramatic increases in temperature. They're basically saying that it's worse than in other areas of the country because a lot of these parks are found in places that are actually more sensitive to the climate change. So basically they're saying that there was an interesting thing in here where I can't remember. They said how much of the parks territories laid in Alaska versus, like, the you know, the continental or whatever, the lower 48, and they basically, you know, are seeing just a huge amount of climate change, like up north. I can't remember where that part was. I want to show it to you guys. Hold on. Yeah, they're basically saying like Joshua Tree and all these other like desert areas, they're going to basically be just like devoid of life, like because of the increased, you know, impact from the climate change. Hold on, I just want to like find that part because I thought that was pretty. Okay, they're also saying, yeah, Alaska is severely affected because the melting snow uncovers dark surfaces that absorb heat, so then it makes it even worse. And here it is. Alaska is also where 63% of all national park areas located. So that's insane. That's almost 2/3 of all the national parks are actually located in Alaska for all of the United States. I thought that was very interesting. I had no idea about that. I mean, I know Alaska's like really huge. If you just look at it, even like here, you can see it, but I just didn't know that it would have that much of the national park space. So, yeah, thought that was very interesting. And you can see this map that they have here, temperature map, and it's a temperature change map going back all the way, like I said, from 1890 when they have the data, and you can see that it's just a very clear, you know, rise, and it's not a good picture. So, yeah, pretty unsettling and very interesting. And then they try to put a little positive spin at the end. They say like, you know, the parks are going to be here, but they'll just be different. You know, here Glacier National Park will be, you know, maybe without glaciers, but it'll still be a beautiful park. And it's like, well, yeah, unless it's burning or something. Kind of crazy. Okay, this next one is kind of interesting. I don't know if people have been following, but there was a lawsuit against Monsanto that they were you know, going to have to pay out to this guy who got all sorts of kind of, I can't remember if it was cancer or something, but anyway, he got really sick from working with it and applying it. And they've been in the news a little bit, you know, recently, but this article was very interesting. Researchers found that Roundup, specifically the glyphosate active ingredient in it, was detrimental to bees, but not directly. So it was not harmful to the bees in like their direct biology, but what they found was that the bees also have like basically different kinds of bacteria and helpful bacteria in their digestive tracts. So just like we have you know, a microbiome in our guts that has like, you know, many different types of bacteria, and they help us in our digestion, the bees have a similar kind of microbiome that can be upset by the glyphosate. And what this study showed was that you know, here it is, glyphosate doesn't actually kill the bees outright. What happens is it actually upsets that microbiome balance and kills off some of that useful bacteria, you know, living in the digestive tract, and then it basically makes them more prone to disease and getting sick, and then, you know, it really talks a lot about kind of like how it can mess up their navigational abilities and all this kind of other stuff. So it doesn't kill them directly, but it has a very clear like negative impact on them. And then of course Monsanto comes in and chimes in and says that, you know, it's proven safe and they have 40 years of robust scientific blah blah blah, and there's no reasonable risk. And, you know, but yet, you know, that's what these guys are showing. And I've talked about this before in a video, if anybody hasn't seen it, where, you know, the bees are, you know, basically dying off in many areas, and I think those are from some type of pesticide. I think they were called neonicotinoids, I think is the name of it, but don't quote me on that right now. You can watch my older video and see that. But yeah, basically the various pesticides and herbicides and everything else that we're using in these, you know, mass, large-scale agriculture operations is definitely having a negative impact. And I just thought this was an interesting study here. So if anybody, you know, has any interest, check it out and read through the details. Okay, next. Sorry. Next, this one is a very interesting article. The Beyond Meat company basically wanted to get a environmental assessment impact study done, and they came out showing how much more sustainable, plant-based meat products are than the animal-based counterparts. And this is very interesting. So they're talking about how, the most recent Hurricane Florence, it basically killed off 3.4 million chickens. I talked about this last time. Killed off, 5,500 pigs in North Carolina. These poor animals, were drowned and killed by the storm. And of course, they had huge impact from all the waste that is usually kept in the lagoons around these large-scale farms, and how it spills off into the waterways, destroys, fish habitats, endangers people. There's contamination risks for E. coli, salmonella, pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, pesticides, insecticides, everything that you can imagine. It's just this horrible, environmental disaster. And basically, this comes on the back of that. So Beyond Meat basically asked the, University of Michigan's Center for Sustainable Systems. And they did a thorough life cycle analysis, LCA study. And this was the same school and the same type of study with the same, impact measurements and things like that they did for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association in 2017. And they drew direct comparisons between the two assessments. And generally says just this week found out that Beyond Burgers are available in Netherlands or NL1 restaurant chain. I don't know. Hopefully that's Netherlands one restaurant chain. I'm not familiar with it, but that's great. Awesome. So these guys did an impact assessment, life cycle analysis study, and what they found, this was just insane. It's so cool. They found that the Beyond Burger generates 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions. It requires 46% less non-renewable energy and has more than 99% less impact on water scarcity and 93% less impact on land use than a quarter pound of U.S. beef. Thanks, generally. Yeah, it's Netherlands. That's really awesome. So, just look at this and, how can anybody not see that this needs to be the way of the future? It's not even I want to keep eating meat and whatever. It's if people do not change, we are doomed. And it's insane. So, here it says, to give you an idea of the real life impact, according to the spokesperson for Beyond Meat, on average, Americans eat 3 burgers a week. If they switched just one of these beef burgers to a Beyond Burger for a year, it would be like taking 12 million cars off the road and saving enough energy to power 2.3 million homes. I mean, just think about that. That is just an insane number. And, these numbers are shocking. I mean, the 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions, 99% less impact on water, 93% less impact on land. I mean, this is just huge. So I really hope this gets more press. I just can't believe it. Generally says Jacko Wacko recommended the brand, and I thought I should do research. Yeah, definitely go eat one. Do a taste test. And so I just think this was very good news, and definitely they talk about how the plant-based meat business is growing. They've had growth of 17% in just the past year. It's basically here. What does it say? Sales of plant-based meat have increased 23% in the past year. U.S. Retail market now worth $684 million. So it's definitely growing, and I think this is a great thing. They talk about various chains that are now, offering this as an option. And I think just as more and more people start eating it and realizing that it tastes great, then it's why would you not pick this? It's it's not going to kill an animal. It's better for the environment. It's better for your health. It's just, I don't know, it's a no-brainer. So, and here, this was a great quote as well. This is the Director of Research and Impossible Foods, Celeste Holtz Schietinger, I think I'm pronouncing the name. And it says, people don't eat meat because they like the fact that animals are slaughtered, and they eat it in spite of that. No one eats meat because they're happy an animal is slaughtered. I would agree with that. So I think as more people kind of see this and start seeing these numbers, I mean, it's just, the companies themselves are going to kind of start going this way anyway. They have to. And a lot of these, meat producing companies like Tyson and Purdue and stuff, they are already starting to kind of invest in these, plant-based companies. They know that this is the future. Okay, next I want to do a shout out and just show this picture because I think it's a painting actually, but I think it's very beautiful and it's a great effort. And I just want to give a shout out to somebody that I'm in contact with on Twitter regularly is Cameron. Cameron has a Twitter handle that you can see there. I think this actually is an Instagram thing, but I'm pretty sure it's the same for his Twitter. Check him out, and he's got a website called My Corazon. I think it's .com. Yeah, I think it's mycorazon.com. Check this out. He's trying to do some really good efforts, doing like beyond organic food for people, doing like a food share. They're doing a whole bunch of other stuff, and he's going to be doing some YouTube activity as well. So go over there, and I think he's only got one video up so far, but a little bit of love to Cameron. And this effort I wanted to show really quick is just a a rooster sanctuary that he's supporting in Minnesota. And so here it is. I'm just going to read through this section here. Rooster Redemption is a nonprofit rooster sanctuary located in Minnesota, founded and ran by Melanie Jacobs with the help from her supportive husband, Mark Jacobs, and volunteers. And then it says from their website, why a rooster rescue? Roosters, male chickens, are the most abandoned, unwanted, exploited, and stigmatized land animal on the planet. Due to their need for specialized care and accommodations, they are extremely difficult to find homes for. We devote our time, energy, and patience toward these birds who are the underdogs in the rescue world. So check out this effort, and if anybody's on like Instagram or Twitter, check out Cameron, sign up, and tell him I sent Sanchez said hello, and check out this effort too, because as if anybody doesn't know, the male chicks in the chicken industry are actually treated horrifically. I mean, most of the time, they are unwanted in the egg laying industry because they don't lay eggs, obviously, and so they are separated at birth, and they're ground up alive and all this kind of stuff, and or sometimes they're like left to suffocate in bags, or they're macerated, all this kind of crazy stuff. So the fact that somebody is trying to find, homes for roosters, I think that is very admirable. And I think I understand what they mean when they say that they need special care, because I don't think you can have too many of them around. Sometimes they fight and stuff if they don't have enough space, and they get territorial and stuff too. So yeah, generally I agree. I think it's just a very beautiful painting, really good colors and stuff. I like it. So yeah, say hi to Cameron. All right, next up, this one is really crazy. They did a analysis of animal movement in the UK. I think it was Ireland specifically. Let me just check that. Oh yeah, it's in Ireland. Sorry, specifically. So whatever this university is, where's UCD? I don't know. Well, whatever. It's some university. They did an assessment of the movement of cattle in 2016, and what they showed was that they were tracking animals that were going from farm to farm, or farm to slaughter, or farm to market, and they were rating them in terms of like high risk or low risk, in terms of like transmitting tuberculosis and other kinds of like transmittable diseases, and they ranked them and basically made this chart. And what they showed was that just in that 1 year, they traveled a distance of 46 million kilometers. It's just an astounding figure. I mean, this number is just so shocking to me. Like Ireland's a pretty small country. I mean, like, imagine what this kind of study would show in a country like the US or Australia or some other kind of like large country where farms are like God knows however many hundreds of like kilometers or away from like other places. And a lot of times, like in Canada or the US, like you see about these trucks that are transporting like pigs and cattle, sometimes for days, like 3-4 days, and the animals aren't being fed, they have no water, all this kind of crazy stuff. Some of them die along the way, either from heat or cold, because they're doing this year round. Imagine what this map would look like for a country that is bigger than Ireland. And this is just 1 year. And it says right here, this is the same distance as traveling to the moon and back 15 times. So it's very easy to see how, you know, the environmental impact of consuming animal products, you know, really kind of comes about. Like, why is it that, you know, you have like all this land use, all this water use, the greenhouse gas emissions, all this kind of stuff, because you start counting in the gas that it takes to run these trucks or trains or whatever that, you know, are being used to transport these animals. And the other thing that I wanted to tie this into was last time I talked to you guys about the badger call. So for anybody in the UK, like you probably are already aware, but in the UK, they're killing badgers because they are claiming that it's a protective means to ensure that cattle aren't transmitting tuberculosis to each other. But what you realize is that, you know, it's really just the cows. They're being moved, and, you know, they show that most of these are high-risk moves versus low-risk moves. You can see the red ones, and you can see the low-risk moves. You can see that just the vast majority of these are deemed to be high-risk moves. And it's very easy to see how you know, this actually is far more relevant to the transmission of these terrible diseases like the tuberculosis or other things that they have than any kind of like wildlife that's moving around these farms. So it's just a ridiculous thing. And yeah, I think this was just really crazy. So yeah, it says here, high risk movements account for 78% of all the movements. Crazy. So yeah, anyway, hey Leon. Okay, cool. I don't think that question is addressed to me. Okay, so this next one, I want to do another kind of shout out on Twitter. I've just recently added this guy. I don't know if I pronounced his name, but Philip Limbry, maybe, has a bunch of great articles and really good kind of stuff like posted. And I really enjoy kind of the things that he's posting. And this is just a little outtake from a podcast that he did with a lady called, what is her name? Grace Dent. So she is the Guardian's newest food critic. And they talked about various, like, you know, animal issues and agriculture and all this kind of stuff. Excuse me. And also kind of the difficulties of being a food writer and critic. And she talks about how you know, there's a pressure on them, like financially as well as kind of just professionally, to not really speak their mind when it comes to talking about, like, say, not eating meat or not enjoying the taste of meat or things like that. And so here's a good quote from her. She says, I think we are at a very, very interesting time with regards to not just chefs, people in general, and their attitudes, which they possibly didn't have before. An awakening in what is actually going on, a feeling that they don't want to be part of it anymore. I mean, I wrote a piece for Observer Food Monthly where I kind of, cards on the table, I admitted that I don't really like eating meat. I was taken aback by how many people who work in food, who work in restaurants, who cook, just said, good on you, I feel the same. What's interesting is that all of us who have a voice in food, we all want to stay at the table. We all want to have an opinion. We all want to be asked and booked to come and talk about food. So we're all scared to say we don't like eating meat, because by being honest, you may well turn the public against you. You may well find out you're no longer being asked, no longer asked to be on the BBC One. You may find that you're not asked to be on Great British Menu. Because of this tag of vegan, animal-loving, bothered about welfare, it might mark you as some kind of something kind of limited, too political, boring, whatever. So, hey Logan, good to see you, man. We got to do a stream together soon. Let me know if you have your internet back yet. So yeah, crazy stuff. But I definitely recommend checking out this guy's website, Philip Limbry, or follow him on Twitter, and maybe listen to this podcast if you're interested. But she made some interesting comments in this article, and yeah, I guess I'll just close with this little section here. She says, people say to me all the time, what do you eat? And it's very difficult to go, I never stop eating. But then they say, then when you say, well, I have some lovely carrots with orange on them with pepper and maybe a bit of honey, I don't know if she actually is vegan or not. Obviously with the honey, I would kind of think she's not. But anyway, she says, I might have that with some couscous, and I might make a slaw, and I might make, and right away you can see them going, but that's not a dinner. And it's really frustrating because I've never felt better. So I think she's probably maybe eating mostly plants or mostly veggies. But anyway, it's just interesting stuff. So, you know, she's obviously feeling like a pressure to basically, like not tell people that she doesn't enjoy eating meat. It's very interesting. Okay. So let's see, this next one, I'm not going to scroll through it because it has some pretty graphic pictures, but just another, you know, story coming out again about a farm where, you know, abuse was uncovered, and it talks about how the whistleblower basically like ends up losing his job. It really goes into some of the, you know, the typical defenses by the owners of the farm, where they're like, oh, we had no idea this, you know, this was going on. And, you know, the workers who were filmed doing the actual, you know, abuses were fired, you know, after, of course, you know, the media gets a hold of the story. But, you know, you just know, like, none of these things really, you know, change like on the farms. And the article goes into kind of like how the RSPCA, the Red Tractor Association, all these other kinds of like, you know, associations that are meant to encourage consumers and you know, basically make them think that they're buying a humane or, you know, kind of like ethical product and alleviate their fears. They're basically just as guilty. They know that these farms are not, you know, doing any right by the animals, and they're just, you know, taking extra money from people to make them feel better. In the article, they talk about how the RSPCA, or actually it may be Red Tractor, I can't remember. I don't want to scroll through because it does have some graphic pictures, but I think it was the Red Tractor. They have, you know, what do you call it? Like inspections of the farms that they certify, and only 1 in 1,000 of those inspections is unannounced. So you can imagine how easy it is for a farm to get away with like horrific cruelty, because literally 999 times out of 1,000, they are going to be told that an inspection is coming. So if you know that an inspector is coming, say next month, and they're going to come on Tuesday of whatever, like, you just tell your people, like, okay, 2-3 days before, man, you better clean everything out, pick up all the dead animals, like, don't be hitting the animals while they're here. Like, it's pretty easy, you know what I mean? Like, and then they're basically just calling this out in the article. I think The Guardian has done a great job here again too. Like, anybody who's reading between the lines or even just putting 1 and 1 together to make 2, like, you'll just realize like how ridiculous these you know, certifications are and why they're completely useless. So I definitely recommend people pointing this out in your advocacy or when you're talking to people. Leon and generally they're talking about the about the Beyond Meat burger being available, and I think it's great actually that it is being sold in meat-based restaurants, because I think, you know, this is the kind of crowd that you need to win over. Like, people who are already vegan, like, even if those kind of products didn't exist, you would probably still stay vegan because you've made an ethical connection. But I think it's really important to have those kind of options available in like a fast food joint, or like places like a McDonald's or other kind of things. Like, you know, those are like the really key people that you need to reach, because when they start eating that and then they realize like, wow, it tastes great, and like there's nothing, you know, bad about it, then it kind of makes them start thinking about these other areas of their life that they might be able to make some changes. Yeah, generally I agree. I mean, like, you can still be on about the burgers, and I mean, I love a good veggie burger, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I just think, like, you know, people can you know, like make changes through like little things like that, where they eat a good veggie burger, and then, you know, next time they might also make some kind of connection somewhere else in their life. And yeah, it's like a little small like gateway drug into opening their eyes and getting them to be more ethical. All right, cool. This one is a very, very kind of sad story, but I think it was very important. And I think I got this one from the Philip Limbry guy. I'm sharing it if I remember right. This one talks about how mortality rate has risen like dramatically from 2013 to 2016. So they're saying from 5.8 to 10.2. This is on U.S. farms, and this is based on data that was collected by this organization from across 800 companies. So this is like a huge data set, and it's actually very worrisome to the pig producers, the pig farmers, because what they're seeing is that some farms are seeing as many as 25 to 50% of the sows are being they're dying after they give birth. And what's happening is that the pigs have been bred to produce so many offspring, like they've been selectively bred to have like huge litters. So some of these pigs are like producing what is it they say there's like 20 something piglets, 23 piglets a year on average. So I think that's over two to three, I think, times in a year is when they give birth. There was a stat in here somewhere about that. Hold on. Yes, here it is. So it says 10 per litter at a rate of 2.35 litters annually. So that means like some pigs can go a little more than 2, obviously, if that's the average. And they're basically saying after 2 to 4 litters, most sows tend to be replaced by younger gilts who can produce piglets at a higher rate. So if you think about this is insane. They're basically saying that after 2 to 4 litters, which is really only, you're talking 2 years, like at the most usually, some as little as a year and a half, these pigs are getting killed themselves, the mother pigs, and then they're getting replaced. So that's pretty alarming that you think like it's like babies having babies, and then they're spent after like not even 2 years, some of these pigs. That's insane. And then they talk about how the pigs have been selectively bred with 3 traits in mind. So it says since the late 80s. They want rapid weight gain, they want a thin back fat because people are concerned about eating fat, and then they want a big loin. So now she added they're breeding the sows to produce a lot of babies. So there's a point that you've gone too far, and then they're basically saying like the animals are just not able to like sustain this kind of like body shape that they've been bred to have. And it says right here that it's just not biologically possible. Their bones are weak and they don't have enough fat to support the reproductive process. We've bred them to the limit, and the animals are telling us that. Yeah, so I mean, it's just crazy stuff. And let's see, what were they? Yeah, they're saying like, oh yeah, you need to have like more space, and basically give them room to roam and like do their natural things, like push their like hay and whatever into little nests and be out in the sun and all this kind of stuff. And they're just saying right here that the key in livestock production is finding a balance between productivity and the health of the animals. This is Grandin. I wonder if this is Temple Grandin. I wonder if that's who they're quoting. I don't even know. I may have missed that. Oh yeah, Temple Grandin. That's so funny. If anybody doesn't know about Temple Grandin, she is kind of pretty famous. I guess she is, I don't even remember if she's autistic or she has some kind of like handicap. I think she's autistic, but anyway, she basically can like see kind of like through the eyes of the animal in a way. I think she's like a highly functioning autistic, if I remember right. But anyway, she's kind of famous because like in the animal agriculture industry, like she's responsible for a lot of the kind of processes, like how the animals are slaughtered and processed and like led up to the slaughter and all this kind of stuff, and like things like how the chutes are designed so that they can't turn around and all this kind of stuff. Like a lot of them are based on her recommendations and stuff. It's kind of like this crazy story. If anybody's interested, like look up Temple Grandin. They've done a movie about her life too. I haven't seen that, but anyway, yeah. So she's professor of animal science at Colorado State University and a consultant, for these different kinds of industries. And she's the one who's saying this also. I mean, that was interesting. I didn't catch that the first time I read this article. And so she says you have to figure out the optimal number of piglets these sows should have. One thing people have trouble with is asking what is optimal, not maximal, but optimal when it comes to the breeding. So it's like, she doesn't really have sympathy for the animals either. I think she's just talking about like, yeah, you're going to have all these like financial problems because your pigs are going to be dying. And then I love this little end to the article. It says, for those pursuing a maximal approach, there are new products like the Hercules arm, $7,000 piece of machinery that went on the market in 2017. It's marketed as a unique and revolutionary way to effortlessly remove heavy dead pigs from stalls. So it's like, don't worry, you just get more dead pigs and then you just buy this machine and it'll pick it up for you and throw it out. I mean, it's just so unbelievably sad that like this is what, the level of commoditization has come to, that people just do not, they don't care. Like, they don't understand that these are, living sentient beings who deserve a chance to live. And they're just bred to the point that they can't even support themselves, and they're artificially inseminated 2 to 3 times a year. And then after a year and a half or 2 years of that, they're killed. So just crazy. Hey, brain inside ahead. Welcome. Hi, Kathy. Yeah, it's pretty sad stuff. I thought this article was very, kind of shocking. And one thing that I really, like, I highlighted when I shared this on my Twitter post is that for everybody who says like, oh no, but I get my, meat, my eggs, my whatever from grass-fed, Granny's farm, blah, blah, blah. Look at this statistic here. An estimated 97% of the U.S.'s 73 million hogs are raised in closed barns or confined feeding operations. So this is just, direct proof of like when people say like that, they're eating grass-fed, they're eating whatever. You look at these poor pigs, 97%. So it's virtually almost all of them. They're raised in these closed barns and confined feeding operations. So they are directly affected by this kind of thing. They are in these farrowing crates. I think there's another name for these two. I forget what they're called, but anyway, like it's gestation crates. So when they're impregnated and they're made to basically stand in these crates, and then after they've given birth, they they basically are like forced here so that the piglets can go and suckle, and supposedly for the piglets' safety so that the pigs don't roll on them. Whereas in in nature, if you ever see pigs, they're extremely gentle and careful with their their young, and they vocalize to them. They basically sing to them and all this kind of stuff. They would never ever like roll onto them or harm them. But in these like super stressful like factory conditions, that probably would happen just because of all the stress that they're under. Hey, Race Lover. Yeah, Karna Sly. I'm so shocked. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think this was a pretty good article. People should check this one out. All right, and got a couple more to go. This one is a pretty crazy article that I just wanted to kind of, I don't want to be too political on this channel. I think people probably know where I stand on things, but like this was just shocking to me. Basically, it's talking about how the Republicans in the U.S. now want to overhaul the Endangered Species Act, and they want to make it easier for animals to come off of the list, and then basically, remove the protections that they may enjoy for some endangered species. And of course, people are fighting this, and they're talking about like gray wolves and other kind of animals that are on there, and just an interesting bill. Like, I think it's just kind of shocking that in today's day and age, like people would want to, be associated with anything that is like, even in the realm of like not protecting endangered species. It's just kind of crazy. Grace says, I was fully convinced that every single animal lived in the best environment ever. I wanted to go live with the livestock the way they talk. Yeah, exactly. Because they love all their animals. And when they're sick and they sneeze, they run out in the cold and they put a blanket on them and read them a bedtime story, right? This one was a very cool article. This one is basically talking about different kinds of aspects of like food production and sustainability and all this kind of stuff. And the part that was very interesting for me in this was they basically talk about farming in general, and the things that stood out to me, I wanted to tell you guys about. They talked about the benefits of returning to indigenous and traditional crops. So they talk about certain types of grains like sorghum and millet and things like that that aren't very popular anymore, and that people should be farming. And the the thing that was also interesting here is they highlighted the plight of women in the farming and agriculture industry. And they basically talk about how little work on farms is actually done by men. But everyone, when they think of farmers, they think of men. So here this says, when we think of farmers, whether it's in sub-Saharan Africa or Iowa, we think of men. And that needs to change because it's women who are producing so much of the world's food. And they talk about, where was the specifics? Okay, here, they talk about some UN report. He points out in this report that while women account for about 80% of the labor force in agriculture, they own less than 1% of the land. So just think about that. They do 80% of the work, but they own less than 1% of the land. And they account for less than 1% of credit offered to farmers. So it's like they have no money, no like chance to get a loan. They own like almost none of the land, and they do 80% of the work. I thought that was just very, very interesting. And I think, you know, with today's day and age, especially like trying to empower women and girls from an early age to think that they can change the world and do things, like we need to be aware of this kind of thing too. And in my debate with Avi, Dr. Avi, like, you know, he talked about the fear that like if you went to a kind of like veganic approach, how you know, you might have to have more people, like small scale farming specifically, you might have to have more people being farmers. And I actually don't think that's a problem. I would actually want people to do their own farming and do, you know, farming in their own backyards, especially for people who are living in suburban areas. And, you know, this is like, I think a very important message that like, you know, women are often the ones bearing the brunt of this, you know, agricultural work, and they're enjoying very little of the benefit. So I just think this was a very good article. People should check this one out too. Okay, this one is a opinion piece that was written by Jessica Scott Reed. I actually follow her on Twitter. Definitely check her out. She's got great posts. And she makes a case for ending the loophole for ritual slaughter, not needing the animals to be stunned in Canada. So this is actually a common loophole in most Western countries, I believe. They make an exception for stunning of animals before slaughter if it's for religious observation, so like for religious purposes. So kosher for the Jewish religion, and halal for the Islamic religions, they are not under obligation to stun the animal before they are killed. There are some, you know, provisions for how they're supposed to be done, and they have to have like a super sharp knife and all this kind of stuff. But Ray says, sounds fine to me, and but then again, I'm a misogynist. Yeah, it's a crazy system. So yeah, so this article is just a really well written piece talking about how in Canada they basically have this provision. It's an exception, and they talk about how, you know, there are moments where you know, the police were called out because the animals in question were still alive and they were already being skinned. So this is it right here, possibly still alive outside a temporary mosque in Milton, Ontario. In the video, one man is reportedly heard saying, "Take a look, the cow's being butchered the halal way, blah, blah, blah." And then, you know, you can see that the cow is still fully conscious and being skinned alive. And they just talk about, you know, how there's various exceptions for these all these other things like kosher and everything else. And they talk about how much of the industry is made up of that. Race, I'm not going to read that comment out loud. Yeah, so it says halal slaughter makes up approximately 15% of cattle and 35% of calves processed for consumer sale each year. So that's a huge number. I mean, it's a third of the calves and a sixth of the cattle in general. And this doesn't even account for the kosher ones. Like, I wonder if that's even bigger. It probably is, but if the two of them together, I'm sure it would probably be at least half. So yeah, just crazy stuff. And then this article also does a good job of mentioning how many animals in the standard kind of like ways that they get killed, what the error rate is for the stunning of the animals. And I don't remember. Yeah, here it is. The CFIA allows for a margin of error regarding stunning of 1 to 5% per animal, depending on species, meaning a minimum of about 15 million animals per year can be cut and bled while still conscious. So that's even, outside of the exception, which is the halal and kosher and everything else, like for religious purposes. And just crazy. I mean, yeah, Leon says halal slaughter doesn't even exist. Yeah, it pretty much doesn't. I mean, but it's just, again, like what people tell themselves to think that what they're buying is better for the animal in some way, or less inhumane or whatever. I don't know. It's just this crazy thing. So yeah, check out Jessica. I think this is a good article, and check out her stuff on Twitter. I think she's really good. This one is just an interesting, thing, super quick, just another recall. You see these pretty often. Sorry guys, my throat's coming. 132,000 pounds of ground beef was called back due to possible E. coli contamination. And, man, you guys are too funny. Okay, so this is basically, they're talking about it. The investigation revealed 17 people already became ill and 1 person died as a result of this meat. So you literally had a person who's already been killed, 17 people got sick, and 132,000 pounds of the ground beef had to be recalled. And then they list the stores and the locations where this was, affected, which products were needing to be recalled. Hopefully nobody who's watching this, bought any. But if you did, check out this article and you'll know, where to return it. And hopefully you'll think twice about ever buying any kind of animal product again, because these kind of recalls happen very often, and people do sometimes die from them. And for all the carnist, paleo, whatever, primal diet people talking about how, E. coli is a scam and nobody knows how these people got sick or whatever, they actually do through science, because they take bacterial samples from the people and they genetically match it to the samples found on the contaminated meat. So it's not an opinion. People do, in fact, actually get sick from this and actually die from it. And it's provable by science. Race lever. I hope Milk Jar bought that. Well, yeah, I think he's in the Ukraine, or at least he was when I debated him. So I don't know if he would have bought this, but generally says there were 2 guys working from pest control in the UK who died from chemicals on poultry farm. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I remember years and years ago, this was I was still living in the US and very much a meat eater. I was reading an article in Men's Health magazine about the evils of kind of factory farming, and specifically about pig farms. And they were talking about the lagoons that, the manure is stored in. And they had a story about almost a whole family that died, because what happened is they're so strong, like ammonia and other gases that are horrifically dangerous to people. And you can actually pass out if you inhale enough of them. You can just get sick and pass out. And what happened is one of the guys working on the farm was he got too close to one of these lagoons. He got dizzy and basically fell into the vat of pig manure and feces and urine and everything. And the guys, I don't know if it was his brother or somebody, went in to try to pull him out, and that guy fell in and died. And then the guy's uncle jumped off the tractor when he saw the 2 of them, and then that guy died too. This was 3 or 4 people, I can't remember the details exactly, that died from just being near that big vat of manure and urine. So yeah, crazy stuff. So many deaths that could be prevented from just people not doing this, and it's just really crazy. This one is an interesting one. This is basically a just kind of a warning about what we're doing today, and how all of our chemicals and pesticides, herbicides, and everything can have dramatic impacts down the road that we often don't consider. They talk about PCBs, which have been banned for decades. So I think those were banned probably in the 60s, maybe. Let's see, what is it? Banned. Okay, 70s and 80s. But they say, but 80% of the 1 million tons produced have yet to be destroyed and are still leaking into the seas from landfills and other sources. And these PCBs, they're saying now, are going to be responsible for killing half of the world's orcas. So this is just, so dramatic and so bad. Yeah, Race, I really second your there. Yeah, after pesticides, I agree. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, like, you know, it's mind blowing. Like, they have these, you know, scientists who are basically saying with pretty good information, and they're probably right, that you know, these orcas are going to be, like, you know, almost wiped out in certain areas. They're basically saying that in where did they say? BCB concentrations found in killer whales can be 100 times safe levels and severely damage reproductive organs, cause cancer, and damage the immune system. They analyzed the prospects for killer whale populations over the next century and found those offshore from industrialized nations could vanish as soon as 30 to 50 years. It's like a killer whale apocalypse. They said even in a pristine condition, they are very slow to reproduce, and healthy killer whales take 20 years to reach peak sexual maturity and 18 months to gestate a calf. So that's like double a human's gestation period. And I've talked about this before too, but you know, a lot of times they pass the toxicity on to their young. So the first young is often killed by the toxins spread through the breast milk. So it's just terrible. And what did they say? I think it was like the UK and a few other places. Yeah, it says populations of Japan, Brazil, Northeast Pacific, Strait of Gibraltar, and the United Kingdom are all tending toward complete collapse, they concluded. So yeah, just crazy stuff. Like, we might end up without killer whales in all these areas, and you know, half of them globally are going to die from this chemical that got banned 40, 50 years ago. And you know, it's just like crazy. Like, who knows what some of the stuff we're using nowadays is doing, or what kind of impacts that will have. Hey, and this is my last article. And again, I wanted to end with something a little bit more upbeat. But the brain inside a head says, do you think that that has the same effect on humans? It's very likely. You know, the problem with the killer whales is that they are very, very high on the food chain. So they have the additional problem of, you know, basically bioaccumulation. And what happens is, you know, all of this stuff is just found, you know, all through the environment. It's just like ubiquitous in all the water and the sea and everything. And what happens is, like, you know, the tiny fish have it a little bit, then the bigger fish eat the tiny fish, so they get a little bit more. The bigger fish eat the bigger fish, then an even bigger fish comes along and eats that, and it bioaccumulates in their fats, their liver, you know, all these kinds of like fatty organs, tissues, and then the killer whale comes along and eats like the biggest of the big one, and then, you know, it's pretty much like them and polar bears that are, you know, most affected, and that's exactly, you know, what happens is they get the worst of it because they're eating the most, you know, bioaccumulated, you know, version of that toxin. So, I mean, for people, like, does it have the same effect? Yes. I mean, I think that's why they banned it, because people knew that it was having an impact on animals in general. And I mean, we also eat, you know, and are part of the food chain in that sense. So I think, again, it's just another argument for eating a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet, because you're going to be minimizing the you know, the amount of bioaccumulation that you're going to be facing. So if you're eating a lot of like animals, you're eating all the toxins that they've bioaccumulated as well. And I've talked about this in some other videos, and there's kind of a well-referenced study that I think Mike the Vegan has referenced a bunch, and Dr. Greger has referenced a bunch. I've put it in a bunch of my videos. It shows that something like 95% of the persistent organic compounds that pollute our bodies can be avoided by simply not eating, you know, fats from animals. So that includes dairy and like, you know, like fat and fatty tissues from animals. So I'm certain that it is harmful to people, but hopefully by being, you know, a whole food plant-based vegan, you could probably limit your exposure to that risk greatly. Is that the stuff in plastic? No, I don't believe that is the stuff in plastic. This is a pesticide that was banned, you know, like the article said, in the 70s. So it's not a plastic thing. It's a pesticide thing. Okay, cool. So yeah, this last article is really kind of like the hopefully, you know, good news. at the end, and they're basically starting off by talking about the typical kind of things that vegans get as far as like complaints against us, like, oh, but you eat avocados, and those are farmed from Mexico and using like airplanes to fly them to Germany or Hungary or the U.S. or wherever, and you're buying bananas that are farmed in wherever, and they talk about this, and they kind of talk about the carbon footprint. So they're saying things like right here, for example, Peruvian asparagus transported by air. Each kilo of these green spears has a carbon dioxide equivalent of 8.9 kilograms, almost 7 times higher than bananas or avocados, which can be transported by sea. So apparently there's things that are even worse than bananas and avocados. But they're basically saying, but let's not get too caught up in this. They started looking at what the actual impact on the environment is, and they said that their impact on the environment is minuscule. British people, for example, each consume on average 81 kilograms of meat per year. Those animals have to live somewhere and eat something, and their food has to be grown somewhere. Nearly 80% of the world's farmland is dedicated to rearing animals. Ray says, no last articles. You keep going until I unanimously vote for you to stop. Wow, that's quite a vote of confidence, so thank you. I don't know if my voice would hold out. I'm getting really thirsty, and I've almost drank all of my water. Okay, so anyway, so this is a great thing. Like, they've just made it so simple that like even hopefully a primal dieter might understand this. It says, at school we learned that energy is frittered away at every stage in the food chain, sun to plants to animals to humans. So if we eat closer to the sun end of the chain, less energy is lost. If you feed soybeans to a cow, you get about 1/10 of the nutrition back out again. And then they basically, talk about how, all the energy is, used for growing all this food for the animals that people, kill and eat. And they talk about the land that could be restored. And this was just like an insane figure that they said. So here it is. According to scientist Joseph Poor of Oxford University, worldwide conversion to veganism would shrink the amount of farmland needed by 3.1 billion hectares. Like, that's just such an insane thing. It says the size of the African continent. So you could get rid of that amount of farmland by having the world adopt a vegan diet. That land could then store carbon instead in trees, for example. Poor estimates worldwide veganism could also help cut greenhouse gas emissions by 1/4. So that's just crazy. And here's another thing they said. In 2014, a UK study found that eating a diet high in meat came with a cost of 7.2 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions per day, compared with 3.8 for vegetarians and just 2.9 for vegans. So you're looking at less than half for the vegan. About 1/4 of greenhouse gases attributable to human activity come from intensive farming, which is roughly the same as electricity and heat production, and slightly more than industry, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Agriculture also pulverizes ecosystems with deforestation and chemical change caused by fertilizers and pesticides. And again, this is going back to the previous article about the PCBs. People can say all they want, like, yeah, but you have to have mass-scale agriculture to grow plants too, but you still need a lot less of it. So even if you chose not to improve any of our systems and not go to small scale and continue using chemicals galore, you're still ultimately using less to produce plants than to produce animals for consumption. So it's just a very important note that a lot of these meat people, they kind of miss out on this part. They don't understand it. It says it's only going to get worse because demand for meat and milk is rising. By 2050, humans will consume 500 billion kilograms of meat and 1.1 trillion liters of dairy per year. So that's an insane figure. So yeah, I mean, this was a large-scale study. They basically, Ray Slayer says, the carnivores will translate that to going vegan will make Africa disappear. Oh man, that's a good one. Yeah, I could see that. Maybe Frank Tofano will make a video about it. Okay, so yeah, so they said they looked at 570 studies covering 38,700 farms. They looked at 40 common foods and assessed how much land and water they use. which ones contribute to greenhouse gas emissions and to what extent they cause problems, such as groundwater and freshwater becoming more acidic. And they published the results, and it says the results were stark. They couldn't find any animal products that were more environmentally friendly than their plant-based alternatives. So they couldn't find any. No animal products. So that includes all the grass-fed, whatever you want. None of them are better than the plant-based alternative. So yeah, the guy says he ate his last Pret a Manger cheese and tomato croissant, and then he went vegan. Well, hopefully more people read this kind of stuff and do the same. So yeah, final words here. It's basically saying a vegan diet is probably the most powerful change you can make as an individual to reduce your impact on the earth, says Poor. Again, he was the author of this study. So he says we need governments and societies to change too. So check this out. And next time somebody tells you, about eating avocados or whatever, send them this study or this summary of the studies. The brain inside the head says, then ask yourself and his alien friends will restore it. I'm assuming you mean Africa. Yeah. You guys are too funny. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. I think that was the last article. Yeah, that was it. All right. Let's see. All right, guys. I got about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to have to get going. If anybody has questions or any other comments or any shout-outs that you guys want me to give, I don't know if I've given a shout-out to Meat is Murder. I'm pretty sure I have. If I haven't, then go check out Meat is Murder. That's a great channel as well. Great stuff on there. Anybody else want to shout out, or anybody else have anything else? Oh, Race, come on, man. Don't play that kind of game. You were very funny. And plus, you started it. It took me a little while to put the one-on-one together. Logan, are you still on? How did you do in your 50K race? I gotta go check your site. I haven't been on anybody's page. I'm like behind watching everybody's videos, like super behind. It's been crazy. It's really funny. I've experienced now exactly what many people have said after they quit their job, that like you realize like how much time you actually need to do all the things you want to do. And it's crazy. Like I find that I'm more busy now than when I was actually working. It's really crazy. Hesse says, do the 7-day race lever challenge. You guys are awesome. I love you guys. Thanks for the support. This was kind of early for people, but did this time generally work for people? I know probably for the European audiences, maybe easier. Maybe some of you guys were still in work. I'll have to check the stats after to see, like, did I get like more viewers or less viewers or whatever? But maybe just in the comments, if anybody wants to leave it, like say when is the best time for me to do this like live vegan news and views kind of thing, because I want to make sure to try to get as many of you guys a chance to engage. Or maybe I'll just do 2 different ones. Like I'll do an early one like this and do a late one like later. Yeah, generally still working. Yeah, so I think maybe that later one works out good, but then I was also worried that like it was pretty late for some people. I mean, for me it's somewhat late because like I was starting them at like 10 p.m. my time, which would have been 4 p.m. like Eastern time for the people in the US. So yeah. All right. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? Hope you guys enjoyed the articles. There were a lot this week. And I even closed out some that I just didn't think were as good as these. Do one every hour on the hour. Everyone will be happy. Yeah. And I'll just die. Let's see. Leon says, I got back from work not that long ago. I missed most of it. Oh, well, that's too bad. Sorry, man. Yeah, maybe I'll do some later ones. Oh, the brain is inside ahead. You donate if I had a super chat. I don't know how to get the super chat. I think I need a lot more subscribers to get that, but I appreciate that. Thanks. If you want to support me, you can support me on Patreon. And I would greatly appreciate that too. Shout out to Brian. He's my one and only supporter so far on Patreon. So yeah, if anybody else wants to, I've got the link in the description of the video. 7 p.m. would work, generally says. 7 p.m. Are you on the same time as me? I think you are, right? Like you're GMT +1. Yes, it says set up Streamlabs. Man, I got to look into that. Somebody else recommended that too, and I never looked into it. Race says I need 1,000 subscribers for Super Chat. Yeah, okay, generally cool. Yeah, I gotta get. I'm working on that, but it's actually been quite good. I'm over 500 now, so I think I had 512 as of today when I checked. So so that's really good. I'm very thrilled. I'm happy about that. Leon says for Super Chat you need at least 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 views. Well, I definitely have over that. I think I have like 52,000 views or something like that. So I mean, that's good. Hopefully I'll be hitting the 1,000 subscribers soon, and then that'll help make things better. If it takes store Visa cards, yeah. Is that for the Streamlabs? Streamlabs people donate and they only take 5% instead of Super Chat, which Google takes 30%. Wow. Jeez. Okay. All right. Thanks, Hesse. I'm going to talk to Logan. I got to talk to him anyway. We got to set up something. Haven't talked to him in a long time. So yeah, guys, I'm going to have to get going. It's been a blast. I hope you guys enjoyed the articles. It seems like you did. And if anybody's watching this on the replay, yeah, let me know, what time is good for you. I think it sounds like probably a little later is probably good. So maybe I'll do it at like, 7 or 8 o'clock. For me, the difficulty is like getting the kids like bath time and all that stuff around then. But I'll see. Maybe I'll go back to that like slightly later time. Oh, Race unsubscribed. Oh man, you guys are killing me. No problem, Leon. Thanks for being on, man. Thanks, Hesse. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, generally, Kathy, everybody. Rain inside ahead, everybody. Race. Hope I didn't miss anybody. I'm sure I did. But anyway, thanks a lot, guys. See you in the next one. Bye.